sure if I should call you Mr. Rohr or Brother Richard or just Richard, or what do you prefer?
Richard. Richard is fine.
Richard is fine, okay. And I know you are a very much sought after speaker, so we are very grateful that you actually prioritize this talk. Thank you, Richard.
Glad to.
And also, for a lot of Christians, you are very well known, and especially in the U.S. I think it would be right to say that you are also known like outside the church circles. I mean, I've read about you've been friends with Oprah Winfrey. You've been on her Super Soul Sunday and private retreats with Bono and whatnot. You know. So it makes us really humble that you are actually being able to talk with us right now.
This is just as important as any of the others. Thank you.
But for some people in Norway, at least people outside the church, they maybe don't know about Richard Rohr. Who is Richard Rohr? So would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, I'm a Franciscan friar. Now, a friar is not a monk. Francis wanted us to mix with the people of the world, not to live separate. I'm also a priest. In fact, I'll be a priest 50 years next week. I'm living here in my little hermitage. The center is around the corner a little ways. And the Center for Action and Contemplation is now 32 years old. So this is where I've been working from.
And you have written quite a few books now. How many? Do you know how many?
No, I deliberately don't count because my dear classmates, they say, Richard, you don't have an unwritten thought.
Well,
God just made it too easy for me to write. It just comes. Yeah. Thank you.
It's easier to count the number of books by you in Norwegian. I think we have 2 translated into Norwegian.
Oh, just 2. Oh.
I think it's just 2. Maybe I'm the one being wrong now, but I know at least the book about the Enneagram.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And also the Falling Upwards.
Falling. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
And especially the Falling Upwards, it's such a nice title to the book. And
yeah.
I also the book, you know, if in one sentence, it's about the potential for growth being a lot bigger when we fall than by doing the right thing all the time.
That's right.
I think that's a beautiful, some beautiful wisdom there.
Most of us weren't taught that. It's very counterintuitive. But as a Christian, I'm convinced it's the gospel. And it's amazing our capacity to miss the obvious. Yeah, Falling Upwards has moved into a lot of languages, it seems. But thank you.
So tell us a bit more about your work and this Center for Action and Contemplation.
Well, I started it 32 years ago. After being 15 years on the road, I was still fairly young. I'm 77 now. And what I observed in country after country was people who sincerely cared about the issues of injustice, about marginalized groups and so forth. But as much as they cared, their energy, their motivation often was so immature. I don't know what other word to use. And they ended up becoming part of the problem more than the solution. They didn't know they were part of the problem. So I wanted to establish a place which would really help people in that position who are working for change but haven't found their own ground or center to know how to do it from a good and positive place.
I also read on your homepage that the main question for you is how can we turn information into transformation?
Yeah, if it doesn't change you, we really don't need any more religion that is just about group belonging. We need transformational religion. The issues are too big in the world today, really. That's becoming very obvious, as you know.
Yeah. You also had, or we had you in an interview for our magazine, Touched or Thirst in English, a magazine my organization or foundation, Areopagus, is running. And in this interview, you said that the most important word in your name, Center for Action and Contemplation, was either action or contemplation. It was this small and at first sight insignificant word, and.
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate a bit on that?
I actually have a whole book called Yes and. Not yes but yes and. Whatever helps you expand your breadth of vision and your breadth of thinking has a greater chance of being the eye of God, the Word of God, the mind of God. And to put together the two great seeming polarities of engagement with an inner life or prayer, we say contemplation, that's the linkage. And that's where the art form is attained. It's not being just an introvert who likes to be alone with himself or herself. It's not just being an activist, but it challenges people who come at it from both sides. And that's been the students who've come here for 32 years.
It's really one of the hardest tasks, I would
It
say.
is.
Staying in the middle of the road, not ending up in one of the ditches.
That's right.
And
everybody wants to pull you into their ditch.
Right.
They don't know it is. It's well intentioned, but the cause that they're recently excited about has become the cause. Yeah.
In this same interview, you also said something about that it's not a coincidence that the words whole and holy share the same etymological roots.
Would that be true in Norwegian?
I think actually this etymological links between the whole and holy it's in German, heil, heilig, and it more or less the same in Norwegian.
And Spanish too. Yes, that's right.
But we need to start talking about the practice you wanted to talk about, the practice that has been an important part of your religious life. And you wanted to talk about contemplation or silence, practicing silence. Where did that start, this pull towards being silent?
Well, I got training in it as a young man when you're not so inclined to silence. As a Franciscan novice, I was only 19. I came very young, probably too young. But we would have whole days of required silence. But I did learn how to be comfortable with it. And it stopped being a scary thing. The older I got, it became not just not scary, but the days in which I could touch upon reality with a big R, as I like to say. So I grew into it, although you probably know the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung says as we grow older, we all move toward introversion. Extroverts, like I really am by nature, we become more introverted, and introverts become more introverts because we've all got to go inside in the second half of life and process what happened in the first half of life. Yeah, it makes sense.
And how do you practice the silence?
Okay. Well, let me begin with a quote. I don't know. Did you ever interview Father Thomas Keating, Cistercian? No.
I haven't
He
been
lived,
fortunate enough to interview him, but I know of him. Yes.
yeah, well, he died 2 years ago. He
Mm,
lived just north of us here in the state of Colorado.
mm,
And I used to visit him up there. And he had a wonderful line. He said, the language of God, the first language of God is silence. And everything else is a poor translation. Mhm. And it really makes the point very well. Because only silence is deep enough and broad enough and spacious enough to allow everything, even the oppositional voices, even the shadow self, even the accusing voices. You've got room there not to reject them, but to, okay, let that voice come in, let that lesson come in.
mm,
It's healthy silence is not hiding from reality, but is allowing full reality. Now, probably you have to learn how to do that. Probably it gets easier. Like now at my age, it's rather easy, but it wasn't easy when I was young. My first hermitage, we that's part of our Franciscan life. In Lent, we very often spent the entire time, at least the medieval
mm,
Franciscans did, in silence. So I did that many times, but the first time, full 40 days, was when I was 43.
mm,
And I think you've got to be that old to have the courage to face yourself
mm,
that,
mm.
that long. You don't look like you're 43 yet, but
Oh, I'm 44.
oh, are you? You're right on schedule.
Mm,
Uh, you finally have enough of an ego structure, enough of facing your own dark side, that it doesn't scare you anymore. It doesn't. It isn't something you have to repress.
mm,
So then once you allow the unconscious to unpackage itself, that's what's really happening. Um, it becomes a delight because you learn so much from it. Now, I don't know if you were raised Christian, but most of us who were raised Christian were taught to repress such things, or
mm,
the shadow self, or call them sin too quickly.
mm,
And so that's what made us afraid of silence.
mm,
Because what shows itself in silence, I saw it myself this week, a couple of days ago, and I said to myself, Richard, you're not very loving in your mind. Why did you think that very petty, negative thought about this person? You know, those are the things I see in silence.
mm,
Um, and until you're ready to face that, normally you won't go there.
mm,
You'll just keep, as Americans do, trying to live in Disneyland or endless entertainment or rock
mm,
concerts, or not that those are wrong, but when
mm,
they're constant, they keep you very immature.
mm.
Yeah.
I don't know if this translates into English, but the story about the prodigal son, it says that he came to himself.
Yes.
Um,
Uh-huh.
so the thing is, I think that I believe that God is here, close to my heart, always, no matter what I feel or think or have done or not done. But
Very good.
so God is here, but I tend not to be here.
That's
I
right.
tend to be everywhere else. And
That's right. Yes. Go ahead. Me
yeah.
too. All of
Mm,
it. We just see, and so I guess I'd add to silence some degree of solitude, because when the other voices are around you, even good voices, you let yourself be jerked
mm,
into other people's psyche, other people's needs, other people's agendas, other people's angers, other people's love affairs, whatever it might be. And you don't come to yourself nearly as quickly as long periods of solitude,
mm,
especially, if I might add, in nature. Nature is the natural cathedral. I hear you have beautiful nature in Norway. I'm sorry I'll never get there, but yeah, it's nature allows you to think your natural thoughts, it seems, because nature is so wild and untamed and nothing symmetrical. Everything in nature, well, maybe leaves are often symmetrical, but almost everything else is asymmetrical. And if that's the nature of the universe, I'm looking out at a desert scene here. I live in New Mexico. Then probably the soul is asymmetrical too.
I think actually Norwegians are a lot more contemplative and more mystics than they like or they dare to think about themselves, because we tend to go out in the nature to be there and to be silent and to take it all in, if you like.
Yes, yeah.
That's very much a Norwegian thing.
Is it?
I
Oh,
think
okay.
so.
Yeah. Well,
But
if you have that kind of beauty, why not?
yeah, true. You mentioned Thomas Keating. He more or less invented or the centering prayer, or the father of the centering prayer. Is centering prayer the main thing you do?
You know, I have to say, at my age, I I call centering prayer, letting go therapy. But there's also such a thing as replacement therapy, where people will have a holy word, and when some obsessive word tries to, or idea or emotion tries to invade them, they replace it with a loving word or a godly word for them. But after saying that, I use both of those. This morning, I went out and sat on my deck with my dog. It was a beautiful spring morning, and I don't think I used either one. I just sat there until, well, here's the way I usually say it. I sit until I get to yes, when the no's are not controlling my life. Oh, I got to do this today. I don't like that. When I can have an attitude of a foundational yes. Now, I got to that fairly quickly today, partially probably because it's a holiday today in America, and I didn't have anything to resent. It was just an open-ended day and a beautiful spring day. So the yes came easily.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned this, because I just today read the New Yorker article from February this year by Eliza Griswold.
Oh yeah.
And she was actually she said that you normally wakes up around 5:45 a.m.
Right.
Spending 1 hour praying wordlessly, and that it was a lot about finding your way to yes, because you often woke up in a state of no.
Yeah. I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, which apparently you know, huh?
Yeah.
And for us ones, we're perfectionists, and we easily, without knowing it, start with a kind of no. No, the day is not perfect. The moment is not perfect. I am not perfect. The world is not perfect. And if I don't counter that, it'll pull me right down a rabbit hole, as we call it. Yeah.
And that counterattack is called silence.
For me, it is. Yeah. But it's by that, I mean interior silence.
Right.
That the arguing, the debating, the judging, the labeling has to stop in my head. It's not just stopping it outside, but I have to first of all stop it inside. That's silence. Yeah.
I was also thinking when I read about this, or your way from no to yes, can this also explain this, or can this explanation about contemplation shed light on this connectedness between contemplation and action? That you need this contemplation to go from the no to yes, and then the action can start.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, otherwise the action is far too ego-driven, far too self-referential. And so you've got to spot those demons. You know, the way I'm using the word demon, sort of the way the Desert Fathers would have. You got to spot your demons, or they will take on very attractive forms of self-justification or self-validation, you know. So unless you spot them, you do good things often, not always, for very bad reasons. And that colors the whole action. Hinduism already recognized this in the Bhagavad Gita, as ancient as that text is, the importance of clarifying motivation and understanding why you're driving the chariot, as that book puts it. So this is not a uniquely Christian idea at all. And Buddhists call it pure action, where you act for the sake of the action itself. It's not reaction to someone else or against someone else, but just acting for the sake of the truth of the moment.
And when you face or meet some of your inner demons, what do you do then? I mean, what I'm trying to get to is being in silent all by yourself. Can that be a destructive thing if you don't have people around you to help you when you really face one of your inner demons?
I think you're making a very good point. It's stronger when you're younger, just because you haven't learned yet. But yeah, I remember over the years celebrating the Mass as a priest, all dressed up and doing the right things. But my mind was thinking critical thoughts about the lady in the front pew who was for whatever reason driving me crazy. And then when in the middle of the Mass we go down and we embrace one another, we call it the kiss of peace. And the moment I would kiss this embrace of peace, which we can't do right now because of the virus, not just with her in particular, but almost anybody, just human touch, human warmth, the human smile, almost dissipated the mental negativity that I was suffering from standing alone and apart up at the altar of the church, you know? And that happened more than I care to admit. that human connection freed me from my day's negativity.
There's a lot of also wisdom of the Desert Fathers that tells it tends to come back to this. If you stay away from others too long, you can end up going crazy, cutting off your arms or stabbing another friend or something like that.
Mass murderers are almost always loners.
Right.
In the history of religious life, you were never allowed to be like, I've only been allowed, well, I've lived here 21 years now. But first, I had to prove I could live in community. So the first 30 years of my life, I lived with other friars in community. When they see you can do that and negotiate relationships and talk healthily to one another and so forth, then you might be given permission to live as a hermit. And that was pretty universal in religious orders, because otherwise what you did was validate antisocial personalities.
Mm.
And literature reveals a lot of antisocial monks
Right.
and religious characters. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the solitary life. It's a connected solitary life in a way.
Very good. If it isn't connected and leading you into deeper connection, like for me, it's so easy to do today because of this tragic virus. It just come into my mind all the people who are going to die today, all the people who are going to lose their mother or their father or their child. Yeah, if it isn't connecting you at deeper levels, it's just going to make you into a very ego-inflated narcissist. I'm afraid that's true. Yeah.
I also sometimes talk about and think about this very important difference about the voluntary solitude and the more involuntary solitude. Like a lot of people these days during the coronavirus are experiencing the more involuntary solitudes, and that's never a good thing.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are learning how to make it a good thing. At least that's what I'm experiencing thus far.
Yeah, it can be turned around.
Right. Like people who are put into solitary confinement in jails. I mean, many of them either go crazy or have PTSD, because the human being was not meant to live alone forever or for extended periods.
And I also think the same thing with voluntarily being poor and involuntarily being poor.
Yeah, very good.
Huge difference.
Huge difference. Night and day. I remember my first day in the novitiate as a 19-year-old. The novice master said to us, "Well, boys, you are now communists." Now, this is 1961, when nothing could be more horrible in America than to be a communist. And he says, but there's a total difference between voluntary poverty and enforced poverty. And he said, that makes all the difference. Just the point you made, just the point.
Yeah, same with communism. Voluntarily communism could be a good thing.
Could be a good thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's very true. Yeah. Richard, I think we're more or less at the end now. I won't take up much more of your time now. I know you have a busy schedule, even in the holidays, maybe.
I got plenty to do, but I'm fine. It was a delight to talk to you. So you're 44.
I'm 44, yes.
And are you married?
Married, 3 kids.
3 children. Oh.
So life in solitude and silence is not the most, it doesn't come very easy for me these days.
How old are they?
9, 4, and 1.
Oh, 1.
Well, 9, 6, and 1.
9, 6, and 1. I see. Well, a delight to talk to you, Steen. Thank you.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you again for prioritizing spending time with us. I don't know if I dare to use this Latin farewell or this pax et bonum, the Franciscan way of saying goodbye or Godspeed.
Have you had some Franciscan training?
I haven't. No, not at all.
See, that's the Franciscan greeting, pax et bonum. Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Peace and all good. Yeah.
Peace and all good. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Delight to talk with you.
every time I come to your house, you're always playing this instrument.
Well, I'm a frustrated musician, Eric.